On the agenda tonight, I'm going to be talking about watching The Warning performing live here in London at Bush Hall. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another video. As you guys know, I don't usually do gig reviews and those kind of things on the channel, but as this was a very special occasion, the first time The Warning have been not only in the UK but in Europe as they are now, I thought I'd let you know what happened at the show, and it's going to give me an opportunity to talk about things that I don't necessarily get the chance to talk about in other videos regarding live performances. So first of all, a huge thank you to Graham for inviting me down in the first place, and the guys for organising the event. And this is something that has been a long time in the making because it was due to happen before COVID, but then COVID happened and everything obviously had to get postponed. But it's great that, yeah, after a few years, it finally happened. So yeah, a lot of organisation for Graham and the guys, but also Rudy and the girls in order to get everything together for this event, which was special because they did an exclusive acoustic set in the early afternoon and then had a question and answer session that I was involved with, and then had the main show in the evening. So I want to start off by talking about the overall feel of the event, and this is obviously determined by the people involved. And the people organising the show, who I've already mentioned, were so welcoming and such nice people. But then the fans of The Warning, when I started talking to them, I know that a lot of bands throw it out there saying we have the best fans in the world, and it's almost something that you just hear on a daily basis from bands. But with The Warning, as I've stated in the past, in my opinion, they're as close as you're going to get to an independent band who are obviously signed but touring the world and doing huge shows that I think will just get bigger and bigger. But because of their roots of being an independent band and having that connection with their fans, being on Patreon, which I've mentioned as well, is such a huge thing to give you that relationship with your fans. The Warning have fans that are actively involved in their career, but also The Warning know a lot of their fans, you know, by their first names, which is so rare. And this is the point about this event, that even having the Q&A session, it wasn't as if there were thousands of people and, you know, we're just picking out questions from one person, you know, right at the back there who, you know, we don't know who they are. It was maybe between 30 and 50 people, and everybody knows each other and the girls know their fans, obviously vice versa. But you get this independent feel where there's no invisible barrier between the fans and the band. And I mean, it's such a rare thing to have in the first place. But then when talking to the fans, they're just genuinely nice people. And a lot of them came up to me and started talking to me and let me know that sometimes there were people who were watching The Warning and knew about The Warning, you know, maybe 6 years ago. And then they saw my interview with them, which was like 2 or 3 years ago. But then other people came up to me and said, your video was the first video I saw of The Warning when I was interviewing them. And over the last 2 or 3 years, they've got into the band and now obviously going to watch them live, buying their music, which is amazing to kind of be at that end point where The Warning have been on my channel. I've spoken to them and I kind of knew about them obviously before I did that interview because I'd covered one of their videos. I don't know how long before that, but you kind of get this perfect mix of that independence of just covering a band who are quite well known but not huge at that time, having an interview, people getting into the band, but then all starting at the same point on that journey. And actually somebody said to me that they'd only seen The Warning, or they watched my interview video in December and then got into the band and then came to watch them live. So we're kind of having this blend of an appreciation of music, looking at great new bands, and then actually meeting up in real life and enjoying music. Because to me, that's what music's all about, bringing people together. Obviously, the girls are a huge part of this because of having that connection with their fans, being accessible, but the girls have something that, in my opinion, is the most difficult thing to attain in any art form, but especially in the music industry, which is authenticity. Because when they were playing their acoustic set, you can tell that they are who they are, and there's no hiding that. You can tell their relationship with each other when they're playing, I mean, musically, instrumentally, the little looks that they give to each other, that you can tell they know each other on such a deep level, being sisters, that they know what each other are thinking, but also they're communicating through looks and things that musically you can tell that they are either changing or adapting in that particular life situation by looking at each other. And I mean, just having that level of communication is a huge thing anyway, because if you imagine a band who have got together, who don't know each other, haven't lived with each other, and then they might not understand these looks and get a little bit confused, and maybe a live performance can get derailed because they're not all on the same page. You don't get that with the girls, but because of this relationship, they have authenticity. And to kind of clarify what I'm talking about, when the girls are playing and say that they do make a mistake, or or one of them, especially with the acoustic set, because they didn't have a long time to plan it, they're very much busking out songs that actually they might not have played in years because they've not really done this kind of thing. But that's the great thing about them, that they'll just say, yeah, we'll go and do it. It might be a bit ropey, but you know, that's it. And that's what authenticity is. Everyone knows that, yeah, this isn't something that's planned, so it is what it is. And it just, I mean, it was great. But it's having that level of honesty. And that's something that is so important in any art form, but especially the music industry, considering that we've looked at so much where artists have been auto-tuned or pitch corrected, all those kinds of things. People really do respect and value honesty in artists, and they have that honesty, they have that integrity and that authenticity. So when you're watching them just busk out an acoustic set, it's great because there's that relaxed feel to it. Like I said, it's the most difficult thing to get in the music industry, to have that, which is such an important thing. But because they have that, it means, and this is a great lesson for any artist out there and any bands out there, if you have that thing, you will never go wrong, because you're just doing what you do. You're not trying to do something to please other people. If people like it, great. If they don't like it, then it doesn't matter, because you're being authentic, and the people that do like it will believe in you. They'll buy into you, and they'll support you throughout your whole career, because you're just being authentic. You're not changing to try and, you know, change with the times or play the music you think the industry wants at that particular time. So it's a huge thing. It's a really important thing, but the girls already have that, so it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't even matter that they busk out an acoustic set and it isn't all perfect, because music isn't perfect. That's the point. So I'm talking for a lot longer than I thought I would. I thought this was going to be a short video. Maybe it won't be. I will continue, and we'll get into the venue and obviously the performance. But Bush Hall in Uxbridge is exactly what it sounds like. It's a hall. So it means that acoustically it's a challenging environment, because those sound waves are going to be bouncing off the walls, and the PA system is at the front of the stage, and the stage is just at the end of the hall. So when doing the sound check, and by the way, I think between 30 and 50 people were there for the sound check, so you got to see the girls, you know, just get their levels. Obviously everyone had to be quiet just to respect the fact that this was a sound check. So those levels have got to be spot on for the gig later on. But having the PA at the front of the hall, it means that, especially considering that they were due to have like a security fence at the front of the stage that didn't actually happen in the end. There's some mix-up with it, and it wasn't possible. So it meant that the crowd were right at the front of the stage, and the stage was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 feet in height. Anyway, the reason that I'm mentioning this is because during a sound check, it was a relatively empty hall, just 30 to 50 people. So the sound you're going to get is going to be dramatically different in the crowd from what you're going to be hearing later on. And obviously the girls have got in-ear monitors, so they're balancing their on-stage sound during the sound check, because the most important thing is, for the performance, that the girls can hear everything. Because there's nothing worse than performing and not being able to hear either your guitar or the bass, or just having not enough vocal in your ears, for example, so you can't hear yourself singing. So that's what the sound check was all about, getting the levels right on stage, but getting them as good as you can in an open hall. But this is the problem, that then when you just jam loads of people into that space, especially when they're now right at the front of the stage, it means that those PA speakers are hitting the first 4 or 5 rows of people, and it's absorbing all the top end of that frequency, all the top end of the sound. I want to mention something really important. I mean, about the girls' performance, but about just playing live in general, especially when it's a medium-sized venue where you're relying on a PA, and this goes for larger venues as well, where you're relying on the PA as a tool to make the band louder, amplify their sound. When you've got a hall filled with people, it means that, yeah, you're going to lose that top end. So what happens is you get a mix that will always be heavy in bass and drums. This is why I always say in live performance videos that I'm analysing, your drummer and your bassist are the foundation of your live performance, because when you're playing in a venue and it is packed, you will lose a lot of the top end, which means guitars and vocals, because they all sit higher frequency-wise than drums and bass. And when I say drums and bass, I'm talking especially about the foot pedal of the drum kit and the bass guitar, because we're talking about low frequencies here, and I don't want to get too technical with it, but low frequencies around 80 hertz, something like that, basically really low notes, like either a thud of hitting a foot pedal, hitting that kick drum, or low notes on the bass guitar. Low frequency sound becomes omnidirectional. It's a fancy word, but all that means is it is difficult to place where it's coming from. It sounds like it's coming from everywhere, which isn't what you get from guitars or vocals. You can instantly kind of hear where those come from. The only way that I can try and describe this is, if you've ever heard like a low rumble or something coming from a generator or something, and you're hearing the vibrations of it, and you can hear it, but you're trying to place where that sound's coming from, and you think, well, I can hear that sound, but where is it? And you kind of have to walk around, either the building or the room, to try and place where is that, that low frequency hum coming from. And more often than not, it's really difficult to place. Eventually, you will find it by walking around and trying to focus on where those sound waves are coming from. But that's the point, that when you're playing live, the drummer and the bassist are going to get heard. That's why they are the foundation of the live performance, because if the bassist and the drummer are playing out of sync and they're not tight, it means that it's all going to sound a mess, because at some points that's all you can hear, or that's your only reference point. So of course, when we're talking about Pal and Ali on drums and bass, they're on the same page, they are tight. And people might overlook that, especially if people that aren't into music or haven't played live, they won't understand the importance of that. But it's such a huge thing. Talking about the mix, as I said, I was on the right hand side. So, I could hear the bass and the drums really clearly, as I think a lot of people can when you're at a gig that's being played at that kind of volume, or at least amplified to that level. But the vocals were kind of in there. I would say that probably for me on the right hand side, the vocals were in there but not prominent, and sometimes you do want the vocals just a little bit above. But what I'm going to do is talk about slightly more technical things a little bit later on in this video, about live performances and mixing and overall sound and levels, dynamics, all that kind of stuff. But I also want to mention about the people watching, the fans, and the people that came up to me and said hello. And unfortunately there was well, I say unfortunately, but it's a good thing, I think, to not have people, taking pictures and videos during the live performance all the time. Anyway, it means that there was no filming, no pictures allowed, which means that I don't have anything to show you apart from before the event started, where the girls were just getting their stuff ready on stage, which you will be able to see the setup that I'm talking about. And there was another picture actually with Daisy and Arthur, which I showed on the live stream earlier this week, and I'll show that now so you guys can see that as well. I was also introduced to a guy who has a YouTube channel called Old Mr. B, and it's Graham that introduced me, so thank you for that, Graham. I've seen that Old Mr. B has done a video since the Warnings performance. I was linked to it, and I saw in that video that he referenced me, and not only that, he put a link to my channel in the description of that video, so thank you for that, Old Mr. B. If you guys want to check out his channel, he does reaction videos, and I'll put a link to that in the description below, so you can check that out. But we had a very long chat before the girls started playing, and then after they finished as well, just talking about all things music really. So yeah, it's great to talk to him and all the people that attended, really, that approached me and watched the channel, which is great. And it's really cool to touch base with people in real life. This is something that I've said on the channel before about the events that I've attended in the past, where I might have done interviews with different musicians and then actually caught up with them in real life, which is something that I do enjoy. This is a really important thing about the girls and performing live, is that they do perform live and they play their instruments and they sing live, and they're not using auto-tune and things that are kind of helping the live performance along. Actually, recently, as you guys will know if you watch the channel, I've been chatting with Morris Hayes, and he was saying about playing with Prince, how they would sample sounds and effectively do the old version of using backing tracks, or playing to a click track, all that kind of thing, loading up samples. And with that, he mentioned about not relying on technology, but we said about it embellishing the sound. And this is what the girls do. So they're playing, they're singing live, but on some songs, and it was quite low in the mix, so it's difficult to spot, but on some songs they do play with a backing track element. But the important thing is that the girls aren't relying on the technology, they're using the technology to embellish their live performance. So what you're hearing is them playing, and there'll just be, sometimes there'll be a sound on a particular track that just can't be replicated with a guitar, such as a synthesizer or something. So that'll be queued up on the backing track, they'll play to the click track, and then it'll kick the song off and might come in, halfway through or wherever it would do normally in the mix of that original studio track. So this is the important thing, that a lot of bands get that the wrong way round, where they are relying on the backing track, and if the backing track goes wrong, if the technology fails, they're now in a lot of, try and find the right word for this, but in a lot of doo-doo. It means that their whole live performance is based on technology. So you don't want to be working that way, and if you are working that way, at some point it's going to go wrong, so it's never going to be a good thing. This actually all goes back to authenticity, integrity, all that kind of stuff. You want to be able to play your music by yourselves and replicate it live, and then embellish the sound if you want to, if you feel that there are particular things you want in the song that you physically can't do. Especially the girls are a three-piece, so they make a great noise for a three-piece, and Pal is just tuned in with technology and using backing tracks, using click tracks. Just to finish this video, and I have been talking for ages, but to finish this video, I just want to talk about some technical elements of live performance, where you have recorded your album, it's time to take it on tour, but each of these tracks that have been mixed in the studio, they're never dynamically flat. What I mean by that is that you'll be listening to a song, you'll have an intro that will have your rhythm guitar in there, then you have your verse, vocals come in. Vocals are always just going to sit on top of everything, and they're never going to get lost. So if you imagine your vocals are at 10, from 1 to 10, and the other instruments, maybe that rhythm guitar is at a 9, and it always kind of sits under there. The drums are going to be ideally a little bit under the vocal as well, because the vocal's going to be that voice you're listening to, but especially if you're listening for lyrical content, you want it to stand out. But anyway, it means that everything is just underneath that. So when you've got this in the studio, sometimes you'll go into a riff, and I mean, especially with the warning, they'll go into these heavy riffs that really take your focus. So what's happening is the vocal, I mean, even going into the riff, you might have a vocal that's at 10, and Danny might belt out, top end, chest voice, a note that's leading into this riff. Now that riff comes in at 10 as well. So it continues on the voice. So we're now listening to her guitar, which is taking over from her singing voice. We've now got the voice of the guitar. But anyway, it means that that's now at the same level. When I'm talking about being dynamically flat, when you're mixing something in the studio, you might have a riff that comes in that now takes the place of the vocal, and then the rhythm guitar is taken down a bit as the vocal comes in. The rhythm guitar's never at the same level all the time as the vocal, because then it wouldn't work. And these tiny adjustments happen all the time throughout a studio track. So sometimes when you're listening to a song and there's a heavy riff that comes in, it's almost like the riff is louder than everything. So you kind of think, wow, that's just exactly what it needed to sound like. It's exactly as loud as it should have been dynamically. This is something that I might talk to Danny about in the future, about her setup on the floor and how to achieve this dynamic change. Because when you're playing live, obviously you need great sound guys, and the Warning have great sound guys. But there's a lot that you can do on the floor. And I mean, sometimes it does turn into almost doing, Irish dancing, or, you're tapping on and off your effects all the time. But anyway, if you imagine, vocals are at 10, other instruments are at 9 or 9.5. When you get a heavy riff that comes in, you want that to be at 10. You want it to take all of your focus. So what's great is if you can get a setup where you organize the dynamics of your sound with your effects. If you've got great sound guys, they will always give you headroom. And what I mean by that is a little bit of space. When people say about turning it up to 11, imagine that everything's at 10, but if you wanted to, there's headroom. There's one more above 10 that the guys on the desk still have available, because the guys on the desk are not pushing your sound all the time to maximum, because then it's going to clip, it's going to distort, and it's just going to sound bad. But if you're playing in large venues, the PA system will always have headroom. It will never be turned up as far as it can go, because it will be an absolute disaster, and you'll just get constant feedback the whole time. It means that you can organize your sound so that your clean sound is always around 7 or 8, because dynamically, generally, that when you're mixing it in the studio is going to be quieter than everything else. The vocal is always going to sound a lot louder than a clean guitar sound, generally, when you're mixing. So when you then go to your kind of cleaner rhythm sound that's probably got a bit of distortion on it, you're talking about an 8. And 8, maybe 9. Now, when you get into your heavy riff sound, this is at 10. And when I'm talking about these levels, they are saved in the amp at this volume. So it means that when it's mixed on the desk, your rhythm sound, even though you're only at 8 on your effects, the sound in the venue is coming out as about a 9. And this is the great thing, that when you then turn onto your heavy riff sound or tone, it means that you're effectively going to 11. So you've got that option. I mean, you might want to keep it, just a little bit louder than your rhythm sound. But, I mean, I've found that live, I tend to kind of push it a little bit louder than the vocal. So when you go to that heavy riff, it's almost like, oh, what, you get that, oh, this is the riff, and it kind of stands out how it does on the album, but live. So this is the thing that is great. And then if you get into your lead guitar tone, again, you can have that at 11. Something that the great guitarists through all time, or across all time, always boosted their lead sound just a little bit from their rhythm sound live. And this is the point, I'm talking about live performance. To get that wow factor, like having something hit you a little bit louder is always going to give you that wow impression. And going back to, Queen at Live Aid is something that they did. They played louder, or on the mix of the desk, the mixing desk, they pushed Queen a little bit louder than everyone else. So it was almost like a wow, just volume does that when you increase the level ever so slightly. But anyway, so you can do that with your riffs. And then of course, once the riff finishes, go back into your rhythm sound, which is now down at 8, because now your vocal is taking the attention. I know I'm getting into a lot of detail here, and this is probably for, the people that are either playing live a lot, or just something to consider about getting a dynamic sound to your studio tracks live. So the girls are going to be back in the UK on the 9th of June for Download Festival, and they're playing on the Friday. And then they're going back into Europe. They'll be back again in the UK on the 20th of June. And I have been invited down to their performance at the O2 Academy in Islington. And that's going to be on the 26th. So I'll be catching up with Rudy and the girls then, which I'm very much looking forward to. We also said about maybe doing another interview in the future on the channel. So as always, I'll keep you guys posted. And if you want to keep up with everything on the channel and things that are going to be happening with the analysis videos, future interviews, all that kind of stuff, you can head over to patreon.com/Wings of Pegasus. But anyway, if you do get a chance to see the girls live, I highly recommend it. And if you are in and around London at the end of the month, that's where I will be. So maybe I'll see you then. I'm going to be live streaming, of course, tomorrow night. So regular viewers, I will see you then. That's going to be 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, as always. And check your time zones if you're unsure when that is where you are. I will see you then if you can make it. But have a great rest of your Friday. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Rock.